All right, looks like we are got the stages live. Want to say welcome to everyone. Thanks for everyone that's been joining us. We have Pavan Kumar with us here today. This is a fireside chat. We're talking about this is funding month with Startup Grind. So those that are not familiar with Startup Grind as an organization, we're the world's largest startup community. We have chapters in over 600 cities. We feature, our main event, right, are having these fireside chats to get founders to connected with the community. And we also have pitch battles and other types of events, but our goal really is to connect the community, help inspire and educate. And today I'll be leading the Q&A. I'll ask people, we do have a way to ask questions in the Q&A section. Let's try using that. But if you have some questions for Pavan as we're going, feel free to put them out there whenever they come top of mind. We'll try to tackle them as we go. And then we're also, New York. So for those of you in the idea and moving into the seed stage, great resource here in Rochester, upstate New York. They cover all, I think, central New York. And then we also have one of our partners helping us with all of our events this year, Metro Collective. We have had, maybe you've seen more in some previous events, but if you guys are looking for co-working space, that's also, they have multiple locations in Rochester. Go check out their website. They have a couple other groups under their collective that are outside of our city as well. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest here today, Pavan Kumar. He is going to be talking a little about his journey. He's originally from India, has found success several times, but moving into the United States, had a couple exits, and then went down the path of mentoring startups, giving back to the community. He's been located between here in Rochester, and also has spent time in the Middle East, but within the U.S. has been in Austin, Texas for a bit, and also the West Coast, and has exposure and experience in those kind of startup communities as well. So a great resource to get us connected. And then most recently, right, as far as his journey after his own experiences with being a founder, he's been very well received, right, in the kind of mentoring startups. He has moved into actually being a funder, and we'll learn more about that. I guess I'll hand it over to you, Pavan, to give us a quick background overview yourself.
Okay, thanks, Michael. And it's a great pleasure to be on this platform. I mean, thanks to Startup Grind and all the community in the Rochester. I mean, I especially want to thank you, ever since I came here in November. I mean, your introduction to the whole community and Wednesday Coffee Club. I mean, I'm amazed, there's so much of startup activity happening in the Rochester area. So many founders, entrepreneurs, investors, and it's a pretty vibrant community, and all the conversations are pretty exciting. A bit of background about myself: I started with engineering degree, spent 3 decades in the corporate world in different parts of the globe, India, Middle East, partly in US, and in between this 3 decades, halfway through, I switched from tech side to business side. Did so many exciting things in the workplaces, always being a rebel, and also did 2 startups. Took breaks and did 2 startups, 95 and 2001. 95 was an exit, and 2001 we ran well. We did good. I mean, we made good returns before we shut it down. Ever since my first startup, I was always connected with the startup ecosystem. I mean, 96, 95, 96, India just started the internet era. I mean, that was an exciting time to do so many things. I mean, I wish the exits were very similar to what we see today. But anyhow, I had a great run, being connected with startups ecosystems all through. I mean, even through my corporate world, I was doing a lot of stuff in the startup space. And I wanted to come back to the startup space again and started investing from 2014. I funded 16 companies so far in US, India, and one in UK. Had two exits so far. Four companies are gone. Rest of the teller kicking. Some of them are making some great strides. All these companies together are valued around 200 to 250 million. So great run, great founders, great journey so far, and it's a exciting time to be here and talking to all of you and connecting to the community through you. So
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us again, Kumar or Pavan. And I think we're lucky to have you kind of join us in Rochester. With that being said, you do have experience in multiple regions. So from you travels, have you noticed any like differences in regions, either how the startups interact with the funders, or just how like investments go in general?
yeah, I think every region is pretty unique. I mean, I've been fortunate to be connected with different ecosystems globally. So when you look at Indian startup ecosystem, it's mostly driven by consumer movement because the middle class is growing pretty fast there. The disposable incomes are very high. Startups in consumer space, consumer tech and all are doing extremely well. And if you look into again, India is a huge tech talent. There's a lot of good startups coming in B2B space, especially in SaaS and all. And when you come to Middle East, where there is a lot of transformation happening in society, but you see a lot of copycats coming up there. You have something called Kareem, which is very similar to Uber, but is highly successful, and eventually it got acquired by Uber. Similarly, you have Souk, which got acquired by Amazon. So you see a lot of copycats, but with a lot of cultural alignment. The biggies are not able to make any dent there, but the local cultural fit really works. So you see that happening in Middle East. Come to Africa, where most of the technologies are just getting unwound there, in terms of 3G, 4G, and all. You see a lot of innovations happening there in the space of healthcare, mobile money, education. And again, if you come to US, I think it's a very diverse space. And it has the most mature startup ecosystem globally. You come to the West Coast, you see, deep tech and a lot of tech and a lot of early stage startups with huge backing, fundings, high valuations. You move to the mid US, Austin, you see very good universities, a lot of technical talent, a lot of good startups. But again, the valuations come down, and again, the founders struggle a bit to get fundings. And come to the East Coast, you have again very strong ecosystems: New York, Boston, all these regions in fintech, media tech, and all. So I think every region has its own uniqueness, and you see this diversity. But the most interesting and commonality across the world is the younger generation who don't believe in working, who don't want to go to corporate world. They want to try their talent, try their experiences. I think the biggest achievement of the last 2 decades is the appetite for risk. And, it is phenomenally high. And, even they're willing to compromise their lifestyles, their needs, and work out of a small apartment or a garage to do so much of disruption, which is really solving a lot of problems in the society. It's not just the capital and wealth, but also the problems which are getting solved by these younger generation. That is really amazing.
Yeah, that's true. We just personally, one of the student startups I saw go through RIT recently, they had team members that actually interned at like Facebook and large tech companies, and they opted to go, pursue their startup. They actually
Right.
joined Alchemist Accelerators, which is one of the
Yeah, definitely.
organizations that I guess we're both mentors of. But that leads into a little bit of like your perspective on how things are changing, right? Like the
Yeah.
people's risk profiles are changing. So Do you guys have any like advice on just like the types of funding, right, that you could see startups pursue, or like when, when's a good time for a startup to start like be interested in pursuing, outside investment?
Yeah, I think I mean, founders really need to do a bit of an homework before they dive into an idea to give shape to an idea. So, I wrote a very small book called Startup Success based on my years of experience in the startup space, and this really talks about 7 rules. Very simply, just to very briefly, it is about starting with a co-founder, get a companion because the ride is rough. Start with socialize your idea so that you get enough feedback and you identify the right customer groups and you're able to do the right solution rather than having to pivot repeatedly and you waste your time and effort. And then start with a bit of a bootstrapping. If you start with 12 to 18 months of bootstrapping, then that should be good enough time for you to build your MVP, get your anchor customers, and also to get some traction. That is when it really helps you, because when you look into the financing space, it is not just about getting funding, especially for the early stage startups. It is about getting quality investors to come and be part of your mission, part of your journey. Right. If you just simply get money and if you don't have the right investors or advisors on board who are connected with the domain where you are venturing, and if they are able to give you some knowledge, some experience, expertise, or network, then your journey becomes far easier. So to answer your question, it is better to start with a bootstrap, get to a stage where you are able to at least test your idea, get some MVP, get some traction. Then you will be on a solid ground to get quality investors, investors who are connected with the space where you are, and also to get decent funding and valuations. Otherwise, you're just spending too much of time trying to raise funds, and you'll go to every sort of investor rather than focusing on who's the right guy who could come and be part of your journey.
Good, good. Yeah, we have a question that came in from Marine. Says, do you have any main things that investors look for in a startup?
I think it depends on the stage of the startup, right? If you are looking at a very early stage startup, I think the only thing that sells is the founder. What are the capabilities of the founder? What are the credentials of the founder? Why is he doing it? And why is he or she is the right person to do that, solve that problem? And how convincing is the story? How good is their knowledge and research in the space where they are getting in? So that is at the very early stage, and the whole story is around the founder's personality and their competencies and how they are going to really achieve this. But if you go to Series A and beyond, it is all about the business models, competitive space, and the scalability and what sort of revenue models they are having. It all comes shifts to the company. How really good is the startup? How good is their what they are pursuing, and how really it can scale from where they are and where they are heading. And something beyond the Series B, Series C is where VCs come in and they have their own yardsticks. In addition to funding, they are always looking at what is the exit strategy, right? What would happen with all this money what we are putting in, and who is the probable candidate? Will these guys emerge as the market leaders, go to the public IPO, or is there a good potential candidate who would eventually come and acquire these companies? They have those strategies in place, and most of the time, they are getting involved with the company just to make sure that there is an outcome within the tenure of the fund, and the startup really scales up to those standards and needs. Uh, So, I mean, most of the early founders, because they are trying to get into this space and do something, it's always good for them to look for some angel investor groups and focus their entire story around themselves rather than talking about the product or what they will build, how they will build, what technology they will use. Instead of that, just focus on themselves and see that convince the investor that why they are the right people, to solve the problem and deliver the value.
Are there anything? I mean, with your own investments, I'm sure you've seen many pitches. Are there any things that you would say are like commonalities, among like
Yeah,
founders that you've invested in, or certain traits?
yeah. I think one biggest trait which a founder really need to demonstrate is the agility. For example, when I review the pitch, I'm focused on the personality of the individual. I want to know their life story, what they have done, how resilient they have been, how adaptive they have been, and what sort of pitfalls and what sort of challenges they faced in life, and how did they overcome. Because startup journey is it has a lot of unknowns, and it has so much of ambiguity. Unless someone is really has a metal to face these challenging situations, and navigate on that turf, it is really hard. So most of the time my focus is on the individual, just to understand where they came from, what is their education, what is the connection between their own competences to what they are trying to do, and how well they are equipped, and how much of research they have done to identify the opportunity, and quantification, right? But the most important, many a times talk about lot of stories, but the most simplest story is, here comes a challenge, right? When founders come to you, they want to convince you with their knowledge, they want to convince you with the complexity of the problem, and they want to convince you with their own research. But the most selling story would be the one which simplifies the problem and solution, and builds a story which says that we are the right people to solve this problem with whatever funding you are seeking. Because founders should not rush to deliver too much of content in one meeting, because no investor is going to sign a check in one meeting. There will be multiple meetings. The first meeting is always to impress that you are the right person, or they start liking you. And subsequent meetings, you could slowly uncover one by one, and just to prove that you have everything it takes to take the journey with them. Yeah.
That's a good point too, because there's probably a difference between showing your competency maybe in a certain skill set versus winning over the investor as far as being somebody that is
Yeah.
likable, coachable,
Right.
takes
Yeah.
feedback and that.
Yeah.
So I think those are key things. Does that differ at all when you talk about like a founding team, right? When you meet a couple, like multiple co-founders, how do you categorize, is there differences between, looking at the founder versus a founding team?
Yeah. I would always talk to everyone in the founding team, because I want to understand the reasons why they got together, what sort of synergies they have, and how they are distributing the tasks and responsibilities, and how they are going to execute the whole thing. And how did they get together? What really brought them together? Is it their childhood friendship, their colleagues at work, or their classmates? There has to be some compelling reason, right? It's not that I met somebody at a conference and we just, both of us thought this is a good idea to pursue, and we started off. That really does not build a solid chemistry. So it is very important to understand the personalities, and also how these personalities are likely to interact. The interesting observation is, like, when I fund companies in India, in the first 6 months, I'll spend a whole lot of time trying to keep the founders together, because lot of things come out between them, and sometimes leading to a bit of a debates. But when you look into founders in US, which is a far mature market, you really don't have to think of the relationship between the founders, because they would have done every homework before they come together. So there is a clarity in terms of who owns how much stake, who is responsible for what, and who is going to handle which part of the business. All this clarity is extremely important, Many a times I see stories, pitches where they say, okay, we are doing this together. I ask them, what is the split of equity? No, we haven't yet decided. Well, that's those sort of ambiguities you should not really bring. I mean, you need to address before you really start the journey. Who's How do you split the whole responsibility? Who is accountable for what? Who is going to get what sort of equity? And the more clarity you have in this journey, because it's going to be a rough and long journey, the easier it becomes to have a smooth ride.
Good. So I wanted to ask another question on you've been on both sides of the table, but you've been also in and out of corporate, right? When you were going through that inflection, was it 2014 where you kind of started getting into investing?
Yes.
How did, if you're sitting in that, if you had an exit, you're coming to hopefully off, some success there, and, you're deciding what to do next. If you're a serial founder and, you have had successes in founding companies versus, moving in a new realm, which is, new to you, like, how did you come across, how did you make that decision, or how did you decide to kind of change path?
Yeah. So, I mean, 2000, for after 2010, right? I get very impatient wherever I work in this large corporate beyond 3 years. I just cannot stay there unless my role changes. Uh, Fortunately for me, I spent 10 years with two different companies, 10 years at each company, but my role kept changing. And the last one where I worked, I had different roles again, but I decided like it's time for me to go back to startup space, because there's so much of things happening right after 2010. It's all news all around, and you always feel like when you have this entrepreneurial zeal in you, right? And you always want to go back and do something of your own, and you want to create an impact, bring some change, right? It's not about money, it's about the value what you can create in the society and community. Well, then I realized like I'm 50, so it's not time for me to go and do a startup. But instead, I have accumulated some wealth. Maybe I should go and do help some of the younger generation, and maybe I'll be associated with lot many companies rather than just doing one of my own. That's how I started the investing journey in 2014. A couple of my early investments were just on PowerPoints. Guys pitched to me a compelling story, and I loved it, and I signed this check. And most of these investments, I'm the first investor. No one really believed in those stories, but I believed in the founders. The reality is, if you look into early stage startups, this is where the agility and the life journey of a founder really matters, because no startup idea will be successful where it began. There will be lot many pivots on the way, and only those founders who are smart to get watch and absorb the signals from the market, they'll be the ones who keep pivoting and become successful in this whole journey. Otherwise, if you are rigid about your idea and keep blaming the market, the customer, or the environment, because they are not able to understand you, the whole, the founders who believe the problem lies with us, not with the market, are the ones who really become successful. So I came across all these companies, great founders. So I wrote the first checks. I work alongside as a co-founder in the initial phases. I keep challenging them. It's very hard to have me as investor, at least.
Why is that? Because you challenge them so much.
Because I frustrate them to the point, they really. I mean, after a couple of rounds of fundings and all, they did. I'm not really bothered, what is happening with them. Like, and I have a couple of companies which are in Series A. I don't even bother, right? They send the regular investor updates. I'm pretty happy with that. But I keep writing to them whenever I come across something, whenever I see an opportunity. But by that time, they know the game. They know how to survive. However, I have one observation of mine is, once founders see a bit of success, they get a couple of rounds of funding, the risk appetite drops. So here is the thing, right? Why you see only small percent become unicorns? Because a company which has come to Series A, every Series A could have gone to becoming an unicorn, but you see very small percent becoming unicorn because a majority of the founders drop their risk appetite when they reach to Series A because they start seeing money, they start seeing success, and they become scared. They don't want to continue that risk, and they compress the risk appetite, and this become complacent and comfortable because they don't want to miss the success. They don't want to lose the success. On the contrary, they don't see that if they continue the same journey, they continue to do the same calculative risks, they could become unicorns. So this is also another caution I keep telling the founders who have gone to the next levels, become series A and all. Don't lose your taste and your skill of risk. Don't take wild risk, but continuously take calculated risk. That is
Right.
when you really become a unicorn.
That's cool. And actually, so we have a related question here. Tom wrote in, what's your definition of like quality investor? He says, what qualities or characteristics should early stage founders consider when they're looking to partner with a specific investor?
Yeah. I always tell founders, just like an investor chooses you, you should also choose an investor. So who's a good investor? One is someone who is known in the space where you are, you know, trying to operate your business, right? Or someone with expertise in that business, a veteran in that business, in that space, or someone who has a huge network which will be of benefit to you, and or someone who knows this entire entrepreneur journey, and then he is able to come and contribute to the company when you need it to prove your idea and also to gain the traction. So that's where you do some examples. Like, for example, there are many B2B startups, right? B2B is very hard, unlike consumer, right? Consumer is simple. You go on the social media. If you're right, if you're good, and if you target the right way, maybe you'll see some traction. But when it comes to B2B, it is really challenging. So when you choose an investor for your B2B idea, you need to go to the personality who is connected. Like, for example, if you're targeting something in a specific industry, go and see who is a reputed guy, or which is a company you want to go and approach as an anchor customer. Is there someone who is already there in the organization, or who retired from that organization, or who is connected with that organization? Can he become your investor? So, I mean, find the right person who could be part of the startup, fill those competencies which you lack, and also bring his experience, expertise, and network to help you in the initial phases of the company. So that is, see, this is a phase, when for a early startup, the initial phase is till the point you prove the business model and get that early customers and also gain the traction. Once you achieve it, then you know how to scale it. But getting the initial breakthrough is where you really need help, and that's where you get the quality investors.
Do you have any like personal experiences where like you've made some investments, but like maybe one of them you actually were able to kind of contribute more background versus another startup?
Yeah. So I funded an AI startup. This kid was fresh out of college. Interesting story. He built an app while he was in the college. He built an app where students would rate the lecturers after every class. So on the campus, he built this app, and a lot of students started rating the lecturers after the class. And the faculty came to know about it. Somebody got high rating, somebody got low rating, and So they didn't like the whole idea. So they forced him to shut it down. Anyhow, he finishes his graduation, comes out, and he builds a platform uh, for employee surveys in the organizations. So typically, employee surveys are run by external consulting agencies. It typically takes 3 to 6 months. They come study the organization, they do certain framework. The standard questionnaire goes everywhere, and then consultants take the answers away, and after a couple of months they come back to give you the results and the areas the organization really need to focus. But this guy took that college experience and built a SaaS platform where HR can do the entire service in real time, complete anonymous surveys, and they can dynamically see the results, right, of the employee feedbacks and on different questions, and HR can dynamically change the questions. A lot of good things were there. The best part is it is a very, very short, and it is very dynamic, and you could see a lot of reports on the dashboards and all. So this guy, we took him to a couple of companies I know in Middle East and some other parts, and we got some good traction there. I got him some partnerships in Africa through a friend of mine who runs a business house there. So these are some of the things we could easily gain for that company, so that we could get some early customers quickly and get some partnerships as well.
Interesting. And you're also involved in a couple accelerator programs. Do you have any thoughts on for early stage founders, when's a good time to consider one of those programs? And
Yeah.
I feel like those are also changing too. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very important for founders to understand. This is where the conflict really comes, right? When founders begin the companies, we all, when we are in our garage and just doing planning, the first benchmark for us is the most successful company, $1 billion, huge stock market. This guy, the founder, became multi-billionaire. And we become pretty cautious in terms of how do we want to really give out the equity, right? I always tell founders two things are very, very important before you really embark on this journey. First thing is get the right advisors or mentors. Always try to get long-term associations. Give them some equity. You're not going to lose anything, because when you give something to these advisors and mentors, the valuation is zero, right? He cannot dilute, right? So get good advisors, mentors. Second thing is always look for accelerator program, because accelerator program is not just about what they teach there. It is all about the network these accelerators already have in place, and you can get easy access to that network, both in terms of personalities and other startups. It is quite possible, like, you could go and partner with some of those alumni of those accelerators, and also they have a strong connection to investors. I mean, because all this is coming to you at a very early stage, you might give out good equity to that accelerator, but again, look into the relationships and the the time frame which you can shorten by using all those relationships which exist within the accelerator, and choose a program which really fits you. Like, for example, we both are at Alchemist, which is one of the best B2B rated accelerator. So similarly, if you really want to gain some very quick and very early thing, Y Combinator could be one of them. So now, today, there are many accelerator programs. You could always evaluate and choose the one which fits you the best. And it is always wise to go to an accelerator and get this early support and help. And also, the advice is try to get some mentors and advisors and hold them by giving them some equity, so that they are long-term interest in seeing you becoming successful. And you can always knock on their door when you need something, which you don't know your among the founding team. They're the best guys to guide you.
yeah, I once heard a friend of mine who were talking about equity splits. When you think big, it's like what's 1% of infinity, right? So when you're early stage,
Absolutely. Yeah.
But having that long-term commitment, I think, is
Yeah.
valuable. We have another question from Maureen. She said that she heard that women-led and Black, Indian, people of color. I'm sorry if I'm screwing up that acronym. Led companies historically get much less VC funding / investments. Any tips for these diverse groups to get a seat at the table?
Right. I think these are certain facts and realities of the market. Again, innovation cannot stop or does not stop because all these imperfections exist in the market. Being a founder of a startup, we are defying the defined rules of the game. That is the skill, instinct, and appetite of the founder. Be bold and be courageous, and there are a lot of things happening to help such communities and such groups, like Rise of the Rest by Steve Case, the ex AOL founder. That's a huge funding group which is helping startups which are coming from the not in the Bay Areas, outside of Bay Areas. They help a lot of these groups. One of my funded startup, Gig Wage, is a black founder. I'm one of the very first investors in that company, and they were supported by Rise of the Rest. And there are also a lot of I don't want to say wealthy, but at least well-to-do personalities who would definitely come and help to fund such companies, in angel groups or even otherwise in the good professional positions and all. They would be volunteering to help these founders. So I think one thing which a founder should really, uh, sort of aspire and believe when he sets out on this journey is, I'm going to figure out and find a way to do this. And I want to give my 100% to before I really, before I call it a failure, and knock on every door and try to get help. And believe me, even I've seen, like, I advise a B2B company out of India. This guy is a core tech guy. He never wrote anything on LinkedIn. I forced him to start writing on LinkedIn. And initially, it was just 2 lines, 3 lines. Now he writes amazing, and every time he gets 1,000+ views, lot of interactivity.
Right.
He got a lot of founders a lot of investors connected through those LinkedIn posts. He got a lot of big organizations who approached him for partnerships. So, you need to figure out a way, and there are so many avenues to do it, right? Go and talk your story. This is one of the rules which I talk on my startup success book. Make the noise, right? And making noise, everybody believes like marketing is a specialized skill, but really no one else can sell story other than the founder, because you have the passion, you have the belief, and you also have the emotion behind it. If you could hire the best marketing guy, but he cannot replace you as a founder. So go and use all these platforms. All these platforms are free, right? You could write on LinkedIn your story, your product, how you're helping. You could take a customer testimonial, post it. You could do same thing on all the social platforms. Simple thing like wearing your branded T-shirt and moving around, it attracts a lot of attention, right? Putting a sticker on your car and moving around. All these things are come at zero cost. What it really needs is just that, belief, and just that courage.
And just going back to you mentioned the importance of kind of having advisors and mentors early on. I think that's also like kind of, well, if you're giving an advisor equity, there's something there, but otherwise, those are all kind of low cost or no cost investments you can make
Absolutely.
to kind of
Yeah,
increase your level of success.
yeah, absolutely. There's so much of talent around, and don't forget, I think 90% of every working professional at some stage in his life wanted to be entrepreneur. right? You go and survey people on LinkedIn. I bet 90% would say they always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but they didn't have the courage or the circumstances or opportunities. That does not mean they won't support entrepreneurship. There are a lot of guys who are willing to support entrepreneurship, but one should be bold enough to approach and talk their story. Unless the world knows who you are, what you're doing, and what are you trying to solve, or you know I mean, they cannot come to help you, right? So, I mean, you don't lose anything by talking your story, talking your objective, talking your solution.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. And then I guess just going back to the topic of kind of like the accelerators, do you see like with now being on that side of the table with the pandemic and COVID, like a bunch of stuff shifted to virtual. Do you see any differences now, or coming out of COVID? Do you see things being changed forever in that space when you talk about like recommending people to accelerators?
I think COVID has created lot many opportunities. The negative side is we are losing people, and we have realized like how poor is the healthcare system globally. It's not just in the developed countries, even in the developing countries, and we also see how disconnected is the world, right? In tackling this COVID, right? We have such a large organizations globally, but there is no synergy, there is no communication. We are talking about reaching Mars and landing there, or getting onto the moon, but we see that there are so many imperfections, on the Earth, and also the entire logistics, supply chains have broken down. There are so many things, right? All these have become opportunities, right? Opportunities to tackle, because this is not the last pandemic. Maybe something else would come, maybe after a decade in a different shape, but this is not the first time, or this is not the last time we're going to see problems. I think what really has opened up during COVID time is like we all realize there are huge opportunities in healthcare space, and some of these opportunities and solutions and innovations are emerging from the developing world. I think telemedicine was a huge hit during COVID time. Can you believe in US it has spiked by 80%? Uh, this could have happened much earlier. Also, we realized like now we are in a real global scenario, be it founder, investor, or anything. We used to run like F50 group, used to run conferences offsite in Bay Area. Now with the pandemic, they went online, and they realized they have huge audience globally, be it India, China, Africa, Europe. I mean, all their conferences went
Cool.
global. Yeah, and lot of audience, lot of talent, lot of people willing to come and talk in these webinars, right? And innovation, right? And they were able to showcase innovation coming from different parts of the world. So COVID has really helped us to see the innovation on the global scale, and also learn some of the best practices, best talents, and expertise all across the world. So yeah.
Do you think we'll stay like for these accelerator programs that a lot of them shifted to virtual, like online only? Do you think
Yeah.
we'll see that, or you see maybe more pop up that are in that sense? Um,
I think the interesting thing, if you see the latest YC batch, there are a whole lot of them from India. So
yeah,
now, right? So l- look at the scenario now. You see that suddenly pandemic has helped even companies like YC, like the entire world used to come to Bay Area to be part of YC. Now YC is going to different parts of the world, and they're able to get some of the best talent, ideas, and all these startups, under their program. So I think this is great, right? And this will accelerate the innovation, because now you're taking some of the best practices, best partners, best people, best processes from Bay Area all the way to India to help 50, 60 odd companies in one batch to do something amazing to transform the local society, community, businesses, and all that. So this this is something great. And also most of the programs are online, nothing limits. I'm part of Mass Challenge, and yesterday I was talking to a group of Mass Challenge cohort from Israel, and very few companies from Israel. So companies are from US, Africa, India, part of this cohort because they went online, and now they don't have any boundaries, right? So I think we will continue to see these changes coming in, which is a huge opportunity for startups and founders just to come out of their inhibitions and uh, utilize this opportunity. I think post COVID, maybe next year or mid of next year, we would see a hybrid model where partly offsite, you know partly online, and maybe you will get an opportunity to come into those markets where the accelerator really is operating, or incorporated, meet some of the talent there. But otherwise, I think virtual and online continue to exist, and it will continue to grow.
Yeah, the founder of Automatic, he has a podcast called Distributed. His team's been remote from day one, and he talks about the emphasis of like having these kind of like offsite or these retreats. They become really big things because everyone
Right.
doesn't really see each other year round. So I do think there'll be a hybrid model. I think companies like that like may have got some insights right on like what kind of works. Like you don't have to be together all the time, but when you're together
Right.
during key moments, how do you use that to kind of slingshot the productivity and success.
Yeah. Also, look at this, right, Michael? And now let's assume like there is an accelerator which went global. They have startups in different regions of the world, and and accelerator, as I mentioned earlier, it is not just about the program. It is about partnerships. It is about network. It is about working with alumni, right? And if they have strong alumni and these startups could make partnerships, what it really means is if you're part of an accelerator, if you're an US incorporated startup, and if they have startups in Africa, you have a potential to partner and
Yeah.
go global, right? Similarly, company from Africa which has a product which is fit for the US, you could always find another alumni from US, partner them, and enter into these markets. So there are numerous possibilities and opportunities. This is what I tell founders, right? The startup is not about building a big company from 2 people to 2,000 people or 10,000 people. The smartness of the founder is to stay lean and bring collaborations and partnerships and strategic alliances so that you build an ecosystem, right? For example, if you see Airbnb is a simple platform to rent a place, but the ecosystem that exists around it, in terms of cleaning, logistics, all those things, right? uh, that makes the core idea much stronger, because these ecosystems will never allow the core to fail because they are all surviving on that core, right? And they keep growing, and that is where the strength of the founder comes, right? Don't just see what you want to do end to end everything. Instead, see that what is your core, and where you can build a platform and an ecosystem around it, so that this starts growing on its own, and you start uh, growing quickly.
Yeah, that it'll be interesting to see how the next few years play out. Kind of, we've had this injection, right? You mentioned YC, because that it could be a whole lot more global collaboration.
Right.
I think that's cool. I'm gonna pause to see if anyone in the crowd has any other questions. Maureen wrote that there's a competition called Grow New York. But I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's like food and egg pitch competition here in upstate New York, and she said that an Israeli company was the one that won it last year. So we're starting to see, kind of some of that in the local area too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Any other questions, folks? I'm going to tee up one more for you, Pavan. I like asking guests when they come on. You've been back and forth to Rochester. You've seen multiple cities. Is there a product of Rochester that is like your favorite, Rochester product? And that could be physical product, person, place, event. Is there anything that stands out that you love about Rochester?
I like, this. I keep coming to Rochester for the last 3+ years, every 6 months, and I think this time I fell in love with Rochester. So I love the quiet and uh, the green and very calm place. And this is very ideal for an entrepreneur just to relax and build something amazing in the backyard. Uh, I really love the nature here, lakes, and you're very close to, uh, Canada as well, and Niagara Falls. So much good stuff around. Also, what I discovered in this visit is there's so much of talent here, huge talent pool because of the universities, here, Buffalo and all. And there's a lot of good startups. I spoke to quite a few founders in the last 6 months, quite a few founders from Rochester. And a lot of amazing things are happening here. The only missing part here, I think, is a platform to showcase all this which is happening here. If this community, I think Rochester as a community also has its own glory, Kodak, Xerox, all that. That means there are a lot of industry veterans who are here. And there are a lot of talent with huge network and experience and expertise. I think if there is a platform that could bring all this hidden and you know onto one common uh, space, and then start highlighting and helping these younger people, younger generations who are doing startups, entrepreneurship, and all, that would be a great thing. And that's a huge opportunity because your proximity to New York, Boston, and all this is a huge advantage. And there's no reason why this place would not shine like any other huge big hub of innovation.
Thank you. Maybe we have an entrepreneur in the crowd here that will help with that platform.
Yeah.
All right. One last check. See if anyone else had any questions. All right. See if something pops up. But other than that, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks, Pavan, for joining us here. I want to just quickly plug. We have another event coming up in May. We're going to actually have one of the winners from a previous pitch battle, Megan Mesa from Bandita Horchata. She'll be on with a guest, Kayla Castenda. Oh man, I don't know if I got that name right, but she's the founder of Agua Bonita. She's actually based in LA. So they're going to be discussing with Maureen some of the concepts of what I guess the needs and desires of Latina founders. So I think that's going to be a great, another fireside chat. Hopefully everyone can make it to that one as well. Pavan, again, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.